Welcome to the second episode of PreciseTarget's Fireside Chat Style series, The Retail Record. Our COO, Liddy Manson, sat down with COO and President of KitexUSA, Donnie Hodge, and they discussed sustainability in retail. Enjoy!
Welcome everybody to our second installment of The Retail Record. I'm Liddy Manson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of PreciseTarget. And I'm here with Donnie Hodge, who is the President and COO of KitexUSA, which is a sustainable infant clothing provider and manufacturer. And Donnie is going to tell us a little bit about himself and a little bit about his strategy and how sustainability is guiding not only his business, but also other businesses within the apparel and fashion sector. So welcome, Donnie. It's really nice to have you here. I'm wondering if you can start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your career, and then also a little bit about Kitex and how it came to be, because it's a really interesting founding story.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks very much for inviting me. And this is a subject that's true and near to my heart. And so, you can tell by my accent, I grew up in the South, grew up in actually a small cotton mill village. And, someone asked me not long ago about sustainability and this new trend, and I thought, it's really not new. If you think about when the cotton mills were first established in the South, there were two things that companies needed to make it sustainable, to keep it going. One of those was power, and one of those was labor. So to address the power, the companies built these factories and mills on the river so that they could provide water, would provide ongoing power source for them. The other thing they did is they built villages around their mill. So because they knew they had to have a workforce. So they built houses and had stores and supported the community and built the whole community protecting their labor force. So, it's a new concept in some regard, but some it is not. My whole career has been in textiles and apparel. I was with Milliken and Company for a number of years out of college. Then I was in the home textile business at used to be J.P. Stevens, became West Point Pepperell, West Point Stevens. And we were basically a home textile operation. We did Ralph Lauren, we did Martha Stewart, home products. And then in 2001, I went to Gerber Children's Wear for infant apparel. And it's a very interesting story, my association with Kitex. When, at the time I went to Gerber, we had 54 vendors, 54 companies that we were buying product from. And so I had a vendor conference in Hong Kong and invited all 54 vendors to come. And I gave, I gave each one of them 1 hour to talk about their company. Stayed there for a whole week. At the end of the week, I picked 4 vendors and told them that they would be the future of our apparel for Gerber Children's Wear. One of those companies was a company called Kitex, located in Cochin, India. And it just so happened that Kitex was the smallest of the 54. And so I had a very interesting conversation with Mr. Sabu Jacob, who's the CEO and owner of the company. And, it's very easy to put up a cut and sew operation in apparel. You can throw up a cut and sew operation. But finishing, dyeing, and printing is a significant capital investment. And so my first conversation with him, I said, you have to build a state-of-the-art recycling for dyes and chemicals, and you have to build a new processing house. At the time, it was about a $35 million investment. And he said, okay. And so
And that was unusual at that time, right?
It was very unusual. At that time, you could go to Tirupur, stand on the bridge, look at the river, and tell which color was in fashion that year. Mm-hmm. Because people were dyeing and printing and just dumping things in the river. And he did it. And it's also very interesting. Kitex started in 1980 as a spice company. And the father was a doctor. And then it transformed to making pots and pans, and then they got into the apparel business. So, so my association with Kitex goes back for 20 years. In 2008, I left Gerber and became president and COO of a company called Knights Apparel. And it was the largest provider of collegiate apparel in the United States. And so we bought goods all over the world, and we did business with all the colleges, with the National NBA, the NHL, X Games. And then we sold that business in 2015 to Hanes. About 2010, while I was president of Knights, I started thinking about this thing called a living wage. And, you know, we'll talk a little bit about wages and sustainability of workforce later, but the WRC group in Washington, D.C. had done studies about what does a family of four need to provide all their basic care, home, medical care, food, etc., and had established a living wage around the world. And since we were the biggest in the college business, I felt like that we had an obligation to do something. And I think I told you this earlier, I've always sort of been the person that if I felt it was the right thing to do, I would do it. I never really cared much of what everybody else thought. And so we started a company called Altagracia in the Dominican Republic, the only certified living wage factory in the world. And we paid about 3.5 times the minimum wage there. And so when we sold our business to Hanes in 2015, they did not want the business because we were paying so much, basically. And so I spun that business off and took it on myself and put my own money into it and kept it going until 2019, and then I sold it. In the meantime, I had maintained a relationship with Kitex and had assisted them in an advisory role. And Sabu asked me to be president and COO. So I became president and COO in 2015 at the same time I had Altagracia. So I've got a long history with that company and with that family. And one of the proudest associations that I have had in my whole career because of what they do and we do. And not only do with our customers, but in the community and, you know, et cetera.
And Kitex is specifically focused on infant clothing, correct?
Yes.
And toddler.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how the market responds to that. What we're seeing at PreciseTarget in our data is that certainly Gen Z is putting an increasing weight on sustainability as a purchase criterion. Are you seeing that with slightly older consumers who are buying for their children, and how is that market segment evolving?
Well, it's a very interesting question because if I took any two mothers or fathers or families and said, do you want to, here's the two products you can put on your baby, which do you want to put on your baby, your most prized possession? They're going to say, well, I want the best, safest product I can put on my baby. We are a vertical manufacturer. In other words, there's a lot of companies and sourcing agents who just go out and buy on cost. They buy the cheapest product they can buy so they can protect margins. We make all of our own goods. We don't source anything. And so when we started, you know, we're a large provider. We make Carter's, we make Gerber, we make Children's Place. We make a lot of product for a lot of big apparel companies. But we decided that we would start a couple of brands on our own. One of those is Lamaze. We have a Lamaze apparel line. And we have a brand called Little Star. Mm-hmm. I decided that I would make both of them 100% organic. Now, there's lots of conversation and going on back and forth about organic and the benefits and the features organic and the additional costs. And so there's not a finer, better product. I don't know of a better product in the world that you can put on your baby. Now, that sounds like a commercial, but it's just a fact.
So talk a little bit about organic, obviously, is sustainable in terms of the environment and in terms of health. There's also economic sustainability, which
Mhm.
you have addressed
Right,
with paying a living wage. You don't
right.
see a lot of companies that do both.
Hmm.
And how do you communicate that to your consumers? Organic is pretty easy. You put that on the label. How do you communicate
Well,
that you're also paying people a living wage? That second component, which is unusual and really important,
well,
particularly for women.
well, the living wage, was the Alta Gracia sports license business. Okay,
Yep.
so at QTex, the question you asked, I can honestly tell you, we probably do a poor job.
Mm-hmm.
We do a poor job of telling that consumer out there why our product is different and why it is better for their baby. And there's a huge marketing element. You know, uh, if I wanted to be in organic today and I was not making product, I can go out and get a certificate and start paying, or providing organic product tomorrow. But I can't be sure it is certified organic fiber made in a certified organic
Mm-hmm.
factory. And so there's this marketing advertising element of saying to a consumer, this is why you should buy this. You and I've talked before about cost. Uh, you know, this race to the race to the bottom is a no-win race. At the end of the day, no one wins, because when you start talking about taking cost out of product, you have a finite cost in a piece of apparel. If it's cotton, you have a cotton fiber. It costs you so much to make it into yarn. It costs you so much to make it into fabric. It costs you so much to dye it and print it and then sew it into a garment. That cost is a finite cost. Then you have a labor component. Well, when you start driving costs down, okay, there's a level that you can't go below without taking it out of labor. That's the reason the minimum wage in the United States is, I don't know, roughly $15,000. In Haiti, it's $800 a year.
Mm-hmm.
In Vietnam, it's $1,000. And so, even though it's technically a minimum wage, a family can't really support themselves. And so, my point is this: uh, when we looked at it, we were just not willing to save 5 or 6 or 7% cost by putting non-organic fiber into our baby clothes. These are baby clothes. And so, one of our big challenges is just that. Now, we're also very interested in that. We're in a conversation right now with a pretty significant retailer, and about maybe converting big programs to organic that have traditionally been non-organic. Now, to really communicate and educate the consumer, you have to almost name it and make a big announcement and have a lot of publicity around it. We haven't done that. We've traditionally been a manufacturer for other brands, and so we've sort of been the guy behind the door in the back end of the supply chain. And so we aren't very good at it right now, candidly.
Yeah, and one of the questions I was going to ask you is, how do you find the people who care about organic? It sounds like you've done that through your distribution partners so far, but
Mm-hmm.
how do you identify those people? Obviously, those of us who are in the data business are really interested in what are the signals that someone's interested in a sustainable product, and what are the signals that will make them buy, and in many cases pay a premium in order to get that product.
Well, it depends on the customer. Like, Amazon and any .com business like Walmart. Walmart is data rich. Amazon's data rich. And so, we go in and do a lot of analysis on search words. And so if someone may be looking for a product not in the baby business, but there's an element of sustainability to it, then that means that person may have a sensitivity to the environment and a sensitivity to organic. And so we do a lot of data research to identify that consumer base. And then we try to send targeted communication back to that consumer and say, hey, notice that you are interested in this kind of thing. But that's, primarily in we're mostly a .com business today, and so that's really how we do it.
Yeah, and I'm interested in your observation that this race to the bottom is bad for everybody. It's one of the things we look at PreciseTarget, that if you acquire a new customer purely based on price, then you're going to have to keep reacquiring them every time you try to sell them something, because they're only for the best bargain. Whereas if you acquire them by offering them a product that has values that they appreciate and that they're willing to invest in, then typically you can develop a more long-term relationship. You don't have that luxury because people outgrow your clothes. Right. So you are in a mode where you have to find the next generation of sustainable seeking customers. It's an interesting challenge compared to some of the adult clothing companies that are making an increasing commitment to organic.
Well, there's some brands, I mentioned Patagonia. If you say the word Patagonia, people think, well, that's a brand that's socially, they have a sensitivity to society and the environment and those kinds of things. But they have years and years of being very, very consistent in that position. You mentioned pricing. I think I mentioned to you, Ryan Buell. I've done a lot of work with the colleges and part of my career, and Ryan Buell's a professor at Harvard, and I'm sure Ryan wouldn't mind me telling you this. We did a lot of research, and there's an element of consumers who don't trust businesses. And then therefore, if you say, I will sell you an organic product at the same price I sell you the other product, they don't trust it's really organic. Right. And so you say, no, it's a big issue. So at one point in time, we said, well, okay, we will say this product is $10 and I'm going to put $2 more because it's organic. Please pay me $12. And so it's an ongoing debate. And it really comes back to education, educating that consumer. And, even though we're in the baby business, there's roughly 4 million babies born a year in the United States. But, there's another baby born, another baby born. So, we've got that mother or that father or that family unit maybe engaged for a decade. And so it really becomes educating them about why you're different, and then building trust in that. On a lot of our earlier marketing material, I put my cell phone number. And my marketing people said, are you sure you want to do that? And I said, absolutely. I want people to call my cell phone direct and tell me if they have a problem with any of our product. Because my concern is not marketing and advertising. My concern is building a product and a trust with that family unit. Right. And if there's something that we did wrong, I want to know about it so we can fix it. But education to me is the single biggest challenge we have. And telling the consumer base why we have to move this way. I think we talked earlier, you go buy underwear and you used to buy a 3-pack, now you buy a 4-pack, then you buy an 8-pack, then you buy a 12-pack. Right. And how do you think the cost of each one of those garments continue to go down, 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 down? Right. It has to come out of somewhere. So, the reality is this. When you talk about sustainability, a lot of companies think about it as a program, and they name a sustainability director. And their idea is keep me out of trouble and, maybe give me some marketing. My idea of sustainability is, if you talk about labor force, is going in that community and going to the homes of the people who make your product and see, are you providing them the means to take care of their family? Mm-hmm. At Kitex in Cochin in India, we have a program called 2020. We spend millions of dollars every year. We build hospitals, we build churches, we build communities. So rather than helping someone build a house, we go in and we create a community, and we might build 20, 30 homes in that community, and we give them all free. We have a food bank 3 times a week where we supplement everybody's food purchases by 50%. We have 5,000 people, 5,000 3 times a week that come to that thing because, we feel like we've got an obligation. And it sounds corny when I say it out loud and listen to myself, but we have an obligation to that community, and we want them to be better educated. We want them to have better lives. It creates a better community of workforce for us. And in the long term, it will be better for everyone.
Right. And you will have more loyal employees longer.
Yes.
So we're seeing a lot of movement and toward sustainable production practices, and a lot of demand coming out of the younger shopping adults in particular. Burberry made an announcement this week that they're going to be building a sustainable fund. We've spoken to other companies who have said that supply chain transparency and sustainable practices are no longer optional. It's table stakes if you want to have a meaningful business, particularly with Gen Z, people between really the ages of 18 and 30. Do you see this as a blip, as an episode, or do you think this is a trend? And if it's a trend, how should big, multinational manufacturers who have not been as focused on sustainability, how do they move in that direction in a way that helps their business?
Well, I'll first of all, it is not a trend. It can't be a trend. It cannot be a trend. We can't treat the environment in the next 20 years. We can't treat the environment the way we treated the environment the last 20 years. We just can't. And it's always, I think the danger is always not being able to be candid and transparent. Because, and what I mean by that is this: if you're a large manufacturer, there's some very large apparel manufacturers, and they've built supply chains up. If they're their own supply chain, they are where they are right now. They can't snap their fingers and get where they would like to be tomorrow. But if they have a plan that directionally takes them there and you continue to make progress, to me, that's important. And you can't have an environment where you can't be transparent, because when you have that environment, then there's no one trusts each other. And you have to be able to say, look, we've got some issues. Here are the issues. This is what we're doing about it. And here's where we're going. The other thing, it's very difficult for, let's assume you're a brand, you're a company, and you either use a sourcing agent or you buy, and you may have vendors all over the world. It is impossible to have a truly sustainable supply chain without strategic partnerships. Now, I mentioned 2 decades ago, think about this, when I was at Gerber in 2000 and 2001, and I established those 4 vendors, okay? 2 in India, Kitex was one of them. Those 2 companies are still the largest vendors for Gerber. It's been 2 decades. They have a 2-decade history, okay, with that. That's how you build strategic partnerships. You can then say, what do we need to do together? If your approach is, no, I'm going to go to the cheapest place I can buy goods, and I can go to this country and save a nickel, you never get yourself to the point where you can think strategically. You're always thinking tactically. But I think there is no question the American consumer has a greater sensitivity toward organic and environment and transparency than ever before.
Tell me a little bit about, I have one last question, which has to do with the retail shutdown this year, the radical change in demand, or at least the way people are buying. And how did you handle that at Kitex, and what is your advice for others as they think about distributing out their overproduced garments?
Well, it was interesting to us because up until now, as a vendor on the supply side, we we have approached the same way as we did when we're on the other side. We have strategic partnerships. And so we don't just go out and sell to anyone. You know, I turn down business almost every week. People come to me and say, I need this. We're interested in people who want to together build this transparent, sustainable supply chain and give great products to the consumer. And so we were able, some customers suffered more. In other words, if you were a retailer who had a .com business, then a lot of that brick and mortar got taken up with .com, increased .com demand. Now it caused us some supply chain issues, you know, because you've got product put up one way for a store and another way for .com. A lot of our big retailers were deemed essential and they stayed open. And even retailers who were primarily brick and mortar, who had a small .com business, worked with us in terms of we didn't get the phone call that says, sorry, we're canceling all of your orders and the problem is yours. And so, I sound like a broken record sometimes, because if you don't have a supply chain and a retail partner that you trust and can work through these things, you may be happy for the next 12 months thinking you're saving a dime, but at some point in time, that lack of transparency and strategic partnership will come back and cause you long-term damage.
Right. So thank you so much for your thoughts today. We're hitting the half-hour mark. Any last comments that you'd like to make for those who are navigating these waters for the first time?
Liddy, I'll say this. It's almost like if you decide you want to be in shape, it's almost like you want to run the New York City Marathon. And you say, oh, I can't do it. It sounds so hard. Okay. And then what you do is you start taking a step. And then you run a quarter of a mile. Then you're running. And so to me, it's very much a journey.
So thank you, Donnie. It's been great having you join us for this session. And we look forward to talking to you soon.
Well, thank you so much.